is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello and welcome to Global Business Europe, live from CGTN in London. I'm Juliette Mann.
And I'm Robin Dwyer. Our top stories. EU leaders demand sanctions on Belarus after authorities diverted a plane and arrested a leading opposition activist who was on board.
More funding and faster intervention. World leaders meet virtually for the annual WHO Health Summit to discuss the next stage of the COVID response.
Italy launches an investigation into the cause of Sunday's cable car accident that left 14 people dead.
Back in business, Spain reopens its borders for travellers from a host of countries, including China and the UK.
Plus, in our new series, The Way Forward, we look at China's relationship with Central and Eastern Europe and the ties that bind them together. Hijacking and a shocking act. Words used by the European Union and the United States after a passenger plane was forced to divert to Belarus on Sunday.
The flight landed in Minsk and an opposition journalist was taken off and arrested. Belarus says a bomb was reported and it followed normal protocol. Well, Julia Chapman is in Moscow for us. Julia, good to see you. So, first of all, who is Roman Protasevich and why was he targeted?
He's a 26-year-old blogger who was instrumental in the organizing and disseminating of information about last year's anti-government protests that swept the nation after the disputed presidential elections. He'd actually left Belarus long before that in 2019, fearing political pressure that he'd been under for quite some time. He'd been living in Lithuania, where he had been orchestrating the next Telegram channel. But he had been living in Lithuania and had been traveling to Greece over the weekend for an economic conference that he was attending with Belarusian opposition leader Svetlana Tikhanovskaya. And while he was flying back, this flight was diverted and he was arrested by the authorities in Minsk. His girlfriend was also taken into custody, according to Tikhanovskaya. She is in Minsk notorious Okrestina prison. And we understand that the charges against Protasevich include inciting social disorder and social hatred. He'd also been on the terrorist list. So there are concerns that he could even face the death penalty if found guilty.
I mean, Julia, there's been sharp condemnation around Europe around this plane diversion. What's the reaction been from the rest of the world?
Well, there have been a number of world leaders who have called this incident piracy, state terrorism, and a hijacking. We've been hearing from the Lithuanian Prime Minister, who condemned it as well. This is what she had to say.
It is an unprecedented attack against an international community. A civilian plane and its passengers have been hijacked by military force, and Belarusian citizen has been abducted and his life and health are in danger. It is unjustifiable that ordinary international travelers have been held hostage to the regime's aggression. This is the act of state terrorism directed against the security of citizens of the European Union and other countries.
U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken called the incident brazen and shocking. He's calling for an international investigation. But here in Russia, the approach has been a little bit different. The Foreign Ministry spokeswoman, Maria Zakharova, said that it was shocking that European countries were shocked. She accused them of hypocrisy. Sergei Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, said he accepted Belarus's version of events and its commitment to international law and transparency. This is what he had to say.
The representative of the Foreign Ministry of Belarus has stressed the readiness of the Belarusian authorities to act in this matter transparently, follow all international rules and, if necessary, ensure that international experts are allowed to investigate. I think this is an absolutely reasonable approach.
The Kremlin hasn't commented on the incident that took place in Belarus yesterday. However, we have learned today that President Alexander Lukashenko will be traveling to Russia for a meeting with President Vladimir Putin on Friday.
Julia Chapman, thank you for the update.
Well, let's talk more about this now with Andrew Charlton, the Managing Director of Aviation Advocacy, an independent air transport consultancy. Thanks so much indeed for being with us on the programme today, Andrew. So how is the airline industry reacting to this? Just how concerned will airline operators be?
Well, airline industry executives are shocked and horrified that it happened, of course. But this is actually an international governmental issue rather than an aviation industry issue. That said, the airlines have already asked for absolute clarity that they be banned or that they be stopped from flying over Belarusian airspace and that Belarusian aeroplanes, Belavia, can't fly into Europe. But you have to remember, Robin, that airspace is a national sovereignty issue. It's not an airline issue. And so the greatest concern for the airlines is just how badly in and not in accordance with the international procedures that Belarus acted. Belarus said there was a bomb on board. The normal procedure then is to get to the nearest airport as quickly as you possibly can. That was obviously villainous. You could just about have chucked a rock from where the aeroplane was to villainous. But instead, a MiG-29 came in and diverted the aeroplane. I think that's when it moved from hijacking to piracy as a strict legal question. But diverting it back to Minsk was distinctly not what you're supposed to do in a situation like that, and that's very disturbing.
And you talked about some airlines deciding not to fly over Belarus now. What implications does that have for the way they operate and fuel costs?
Well, if the flight involves a significant diversion, then obviously there will be more fuel burnt and more emissions made, none of which is good news. But if, on the other hand, you have to do a complete and accurate due diligence of every passenger on the aeroplane to see whether or not you'll spend 7 hours at Minsk airport, then perhaps it's, swings and roundabouts. I think the fuel burn is an issue. Of course it is. Efficient flying is always an issue, but the safety of passengers always comes first.
But it really is the last thing the industry needs right now, given how much it's already been impacted by coronavirus.
Oh, yeah. If it's not one thing, it's another at the moment. But this is something which I think can be isolated in that if the issue is Belarus airspace, you don't go anywhere near Belarus airspace, and hopefully we let the international government agencies and the international political forces work their way through all this.
And you mentioned aviation law. How does it apply to this case, and do you think it is operating effectively?
Well, the fundamental rule of aviation law is that each country controls its airspace. And in that regard, it's working very effectively because Belarus absolutely controlled what was going on in its airspace. And each country banning their carriers from flying into that airspace is also the system working effectively. It's also clear that what Belarus did is not in compliance with international aviation procedures, and that's an outrageous act.
OK, Andrew Charlton from Aviation Advocacy, thanks so much indeed for joining us on the programme today.
Pleasure.
Well, Belarus has been forced onto the agenda at a summit of EU leaders, which is just getting underway. They had been due to discuss a number of other issues, including relations with Russia and the UK. Well, Tony Waterman is in Brussels for us. Tony, good to see you. How strong might the response to this incident be from EU leaders?
Well, these leaders have been expressing just outrage over this incident in really unusually strident terms. They've called it a scandal, a hijacking, state-sponsored aviation piracy. And they say that Europe needs to take a very robust approach to this incident. And France saying that all options are on the table. So this is now front and center at this leaders summit, which is getting underway. Take a listen to what Charles Michel had to say heading into this meeting just about an hour ago.
What happened yesterday is an international scandal. Life of European civilians were at risk yesterday. This is not acceptable, and that's why we put the debate on sanctions on the table of the European Council. We are preparing different options, different possible measures, and I hope tonight we can take decisions on that.
The easiest and most immediate action to take would be to sanction the individuals and entities involved in this incident, which could include the Belarusian president, Alexander Lukashenko himself, because the state media in Belarus says that he is the one that made the call to forcibly ground this airline. Other options, but options that perhaps would be more difficult to execute, include suspending EU flights from flying over Belarusian airspace or banning the country's national carrier from landing at airports within the EU, or perhaps even halting all transport between Belarus and the bloc completely, including ground transport, which would not only be tricky, but also could be quite costly for EU companies, particularly these airlines, which may have to reroute their planes, or for companies looking to use long haul to get their products across Europe.
So it's a logistical and a diplomatic minefield. Let's get back to this EU summit, though, because there are other things on the agenda. Did they get to any of them?
Well, they're going to be talking about Russia and the UK. The Russia conversation has been one that has been persistently delayed because of the pandemic. But the relationship between the EU and Russia has actually been deteriorating over this time. There's been this tit-for-tat sanctions going on, which was kicked off by the EU, imposing sanctions on Russian officials over the alleged poisoning and detention of Alexei Navalny. And it's expected that the High Representative and the Commission President are going to be asked to draw up a new plan on the EU-Russia relationship to present at the next meeting in June. They're going to also be talking about the UK and asking and pushing for the full and proper implementation of the Northern Ireland Protocol. And also they're going to be talking about Israel and Palestine, which of course now we're seeing the ceasefire, but Europe looking for a more permanent solution, one that probably involves a two-state solution.
Tony Waterman, thank you very much for the update.
Commodity prices have fallen after Chinese authorities warned against excessive speculation. Steel, copper and iron prices tumbled after regulators said they would target monopolies and hoarders. Some economists are concerned the pandemic recovery and strong demand for raw materials could trigger too much inflation.
Huawei has again denied rumours that it will build electric vehicles. The Chinese tech giant says the company does not build battery cars and will not invest in companies that do. There's been speculation about Huawei making a big strategic change after being targeted by US trade restrictions.
Ericsson says it might end up with a smaller share of China's 5G market than expected. The company says the cut would be partly due to the Swedish government banning the Chinese company Huawei from its 5G networks. Huawei has appealed the ruling in Sweden, and a decision is expected over the coming weeks.
Cryptocurrencies have bounced off weekend lows. Bitcoin and other tokens had plunged on news of a Chinese crackdown on the sector. But on Monday, Bitcoin climbed as high as $37,000. China's so-called cryptocurrency miners account for 70% of global supply.
British-based steelmaker Liberty Steel is selling part of its UK assets to pay off one of its creditors. The firm says it will likely sell its aerospace and special alloys steel business in Stocksbridge as part of a wider restructuring. It confirmed it also is looking to sell units in the Midlands and in Essex in the south of England.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead. Banking on a city break. London is splashing millions of dollars to lure British tourists.
Search CGTN Europe wherever you get your podcasts to subscribe to The Agenda podcast. The Agenda with me, Stephen Cole, always gets to the heart of the story. Just subscribe today and listen now.
Covering the world from 4 continents. A new horizon. Teams in Beijing, Washington, D.C., Nairobi, and London. Who connect, interact, and inquire. To bring you the stories that matter to all. The Link, only on CGTN. Facing the unknown is always difficult. In a world in turmoil, it's easy to lose orientation. But when the storms come, we have to see the possibilities. Reinvent. Find new opportunities. Discover a path forward. CGTN. See the difference.
The world has changed under the pressure of the pandemic. For many of us, life is returning to some kind of normal. As we're adapting to changes in all of our lives, let Global Business Europe be your guide to the new normal. Join us weekdays on CGTN.
Welcome back to Global Business Europe, live from London. And a reminder, CGTN is available to watch for free on all the major digital platforms, on Smart TV or online, on Roku, Apple TV, Amazon Fire and Android TV. You can also find us on YouTube and Dailymotion, as well as CGTN.com and the CGTN app.
Nearly a year and a half since the beginning of the pandemic, and the global health crisis continues. As the world's health chiefs gather online to find urgent solutions, the Director General of the World Health Organization has issued some dire warnings. Joining us now is CGTN's Andrew Wilson, who is in Oxford. So, Andrew, we've heard some dire warnings and serious pledges today.
Yeah, we have. I mean, it's worth bearing in mind that the World Health Assembly is a meeting that normally would go unnoticed as far as the world's concerned, but this is the 74th such annual get-together. But because of the pandemic, all of a sudden, the World Health Organization is very much in the spotlight, and the world is turning on what it has to say about how our healthcare systems around the world work or don't. So it's a very important moment for Dr. Ghebreyesus to get the world's attention and to push forward some agendas which they've been saying for a long time are extremely important. Now, those agendas range from mental health issues to patient safety to particularly antimicrobial resistance, the danger of antibiotics, the health of the workforce, and all these other issues, and communication particularly, that they've been concerned about for all this time. But of course we're seeing it all through the prism of the pandemic, and Dr. Ghebreyesus has made it quite clear that he thinks the world needs to get its act together as far as the pandemic's concerned, not only because this one is still very much underway, but because others are almost certainly going to come in the future. And as far as WHO scientists are concerned, not enough has been done. The focus of this, the battlefield of all this, if you like, is the vaccination arena. Dr. Ghebreyesus was very critical of what he called the scandalous iniquity of the vaccine. The fact that 75% of vaccines have been delivered in just 10% of just 10 countries around the world, and this needs to change. He pointed out that enough vaccines have actually been put into enough arms that had it been done appropriately around the world, all healthcare and all vulnerable people would now have been vaccinated worldwide. So he was anxious to make this the issue because he knows this is the issue that people will focus upon, because it's an issue that's alive in so many countries around the world anyway. This is what he had to say.
So today I'm calling on member states to support a massive push to vaccinate at least 10% of the population of every country by September, and a drive to December to achieve our goal of vaccinating at least 30% by the end of the year.
And that's all very well. The figures stack up for that. But actually, when you look at the delivery of vaccines, they've been extremely difficult, not to mention the problems perhaps that we've looked at in the European Union. But also, if you look at Africa, 20,000 vaccines destroyed in Malawi because they couldn't get them into arms quickly enough before they expired. 59,000 in South Sudan. All these problems still exist with the logistics. So there are a great many considerations then still for Dr. Ghebreyesus and the countries around the world. The other issue, of course, is that a lot of Western leaders have been garnering their survival on the success of their vaccination programs. If you take the UK, for example, Boris Johnson has regained his popularity with the British public by vaccinating Britain. So the leaders in the Western world have their own pressures as far as vaccinations are concerned. They may sign up to the idea of vaccines around the world, but they are aware that their political survival often depends on keeping them at home.
And Andrew, you mentioned there were other issues being talked about today. What else has been said at the Assembly?
Well, a lot of high-profile leaders turned out today to make their feelings known, not least Angela Merkel from Germany, France, Emmanuel Macron from France, even the Director General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, also came out to speak today. So a lot of people have gathered to make it clear that they're on board with the sentiments that are coming out of the WHO. They appreciate and are behind the idea of getting vaccines around the world and getting the communication and the sharing of expertise and medicines around the world as much as possible, and they take on board this message that we're all in this together. Another one who spoke was the head of the Chinese National Health Commission as well. This is what he had to say today.
China is committed to helping countries with vulnerable health systems to improve their response capacity. Recently, the WHO approved China's vaccine to be listed for emergency use, which provides a very favourable condition for further vaccine cooperation. We call upon all countries with capacity to facilitate vaccine availability, particularly to developing countries.
Now, I said before that this meeting would normally have gone unnoticed. It's a much more important meeting than that. Dr. Ghebreyesus is really trying to attract the world's attention. One thing that he does have on his side is that this particular White House administration is far more enthusiastic about engaging with the WHO. The United States in general has always been lukewarm about United Nations and UN-sponsored groupings and so on. And Donald Trump, of course, was particularly averse and withdrew his cooperation from the WHO. Well, the Biden administration is back on board, and that is something that Dr. Ghebreyesus will want to exploit as much as he can to make sure that President Biden joins the other world leaders in pushing for this communicative approach to primary health care and dealing with this pandemic and futures to come. As they said today, the lesson is still, we're all in this together.
Andrew Wilson, thank you.
India's COVID-19 death toll has passed the 300,000 mark. It took less than a month to record a third of that amount. Experts warn that the real number of fatalities might be much higher, as many deaths are not officially recorded. Poor infrastructure and overburdened hospitals have contributed to the surge in the total number of infections across the country, now running in excess of 26 million. Spain has lifted travel restrictions for a host of countries, including the UK and China. However, the UK government is still advising against travel to Spain and other countries unless it's essential. Rahul Pathak reports from Madrid.
Well, I'm at Barajas Airport. This is Madrid's main international airport, and from today, people from 10 countries, including the UK and China, will be able to enter Spain without the need for a PCR test or without the need to self-quarantine on arrival. Now, this should give a major boost for the country's tourism sector in time for the summer season. Tourism, of course, is Spain's biggest source of income. Pre-pandemic, it generated over 12% of the country's GDP when it was the second most visited country in the world. This year, it hopes to welcome around 45 million foreign tourists. That's just over half the pre-pandemic total registered in 2019.
I just came from London Heathrow. It feels all right because if you don't have to do PCR, that's another £100 that you don't have to spend on, and then it feels safe in the plane, like everyone with a mask on and everything just feels normal. So back to holidays again, so I guess that's all right.
Well, it actually feels nice because it's starting to feel like everything's going back to normal, like little by little. So, yeah, still weird though.
Now, the lifting of restrictions coincides with the launch of a new promotional campaign by the Spanish government entitled You Deserve Spain. The campaign will highlight the different kinds of holiday Spain can offer, from the sun and the beach to nature tourism and city breaks. Now, the campaign will run between May and July, and organisers hope it'll garner up to 450 million views on social media. Now, we've already seen evidence that the desire to come to Spain is already there. It's reported that in the UK alone, 100,000 Britons are expected to fly to Spain this week. What's more, the Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez has announced that fully vaccinated people from any country will be allowed to enter Spain from June the 7th. Rahul Pathak, CGTN, Madrid.
New figures are revealing how big a hammer blow the pandemic has delivered to the British travel and tourism sector. The UK Office for National Statistics says the number of overseas residents visiting the UK plummeted by 73% last year, down to around 11 million. And those visitors spent nearly $9 billion during their time in the UK. That might sound like a lot of money, but it's down 78% compared to the previous year. It's a similar story for the number of Brits going on holiday abroad. Nearly 24 million went overseas in 2020. That is a fall of 74%. And that means they spent less money. UK residents splashed nearly $20 billion on visits abroad in 2020. That's a fall of 78% on the previous year. So a new campaign worth millions of dollars has been launched to kickstart domestic tourism in London. CGTN's Paul Barber reports.
This is Trafalgar Square in the heart of London's West End, home to the iconic Nelson's Column and the National Gallery. In normal times, it would be packed with tourists from all over the world all year round. But visits from overseas dropped 73% last year. And with foreign travel restrictions still in place, it will be some time before the crowds return. So the UK and London especially are banking on domestic tourism to provide a shot in the arm to the industry this year instead. The pandemic led to a 64% drop in domestic tourism in the capital last year. So a new $8.5 million campaign called Let's Do London has been launched to remind Brits all around the country that they have a world-class megacity on their doorstep.
It's about throwing a showcase onto all the amazing content and things that are happening in London over the summer. So whether that's the theatres and new productions that are coming out, whether that's art exhibitions, whether that's pop-up experiences on the streets, or where we started this week is with our Let's Eat campaign. So that's all about the fabulous dining and restaurant and bar offerings in London. We were hit very badly. London is an international city, so we rely very heavily on international tourists coming in. And that has not happened for the last year. So 1 in 7 jobs in London is from the tourism and hospitality industry, so it has hit very badly. Most of our hotels have been closed. There's been nobody on retail. Our footfall in central London has been down by about 8%. So no, it's been tough, but I think what has happened is the industry has really come together during this lockdown, and they have created new, safe and hygienic ways of doing their attractions. They've rethought the logistics of how you walk through attractions and one-way systems. There's so many really innovative things that are going to come out of this that I think actually we will change, but it will be changed for the better.
More than 60 million COVID vaccinations have now been given out in the UK, and more than 22 million people have had 2 doses. And with news that the jabs seem to be providing good protection against the so-called India variant of the virus still spreading in parts of England, confidence is building that a full opening up of the country can still go ahead on June the 21st. And with better weather hopefully on the way, London's leading attractions could soon be bustling with British residents rediscovering their own capital. Paul Barber, CGTN, London.
China has condemned a report in the United States that alleges lab staff at the Wuhan Institute of Virology sought medical treatment before China announced the coronavirus outbreak. The Wall Street Journal cited a previously undisclosed US intelligence report. Here's the Chinese Foreign Ministry.
China's Wuhan Institute of Virology, under the Chinese Academy of Sciences, issued a statement this March saying its staff had never been exposed to the virus before the end of 2019. None of the staff and postgraduates in the lab have been infected so far.
Well, the exact origin of the coronavirus is still unknown, but some experts believe it may have leaked from the Wuhan Institute of Virology in the city which saw the first major outbreak of the disease. The World Health Organization says such accusations are extremely unlikely. The Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson asked for more clarity on the accusation and urged all parties to take a scientific approach to ending the pandemic.
The first delivery of raw materials to manufacture China's Cyanobac vaccine has arrived in Egypt. It's hoped that 2 million doses of the treatment could be developed from the first batch of supplies. Under the terms of an agreement signed by Beijing and Cairo, Egypt will receive enough resources to meet domestic vaccine needs while also exporting to other African nations. Production is due to begin next month.
Still ahead on CGTN, we speak to a survivor of the Gansu ultramarathon, where extreme weather killed 21 runners.
More than 100,000 people in Italy have now died from COVID-19.
The vaccination programme offers some hope for the future, but intensive care units are near capacity.
The Spanish government is hoping to vaccinate over 1 million people by next month.
Living in Germany are struggling with their mental health.
Hungary is supplementing the EU's vaccine rollout, buying doses from Russia and China to speed up the process.
4 million people have tested positive in France.
After a grim winter, the promise of a spring bloom that could mean freedom for millions.
On the agenda with me, Stephen Cole, we look up into space. We look down into data. We look at debt. We look at politics. We look at opioids, climate change. We look at all the issues that really matter around the world. But you matter too. We want to tell the stories you want to see and hear about. Make it your agenda.
Roger, radio loud and clear.
We can try out the wild and crazy ideas.
Nothing can stop an idea whose time is coming. This idea is coming.
I actually feel quite comfortable in isolation.
We should all be very busy when we're trying to save the world.
We hope it will happen. We have to live in hope.
The agreement is signed. But what is the real deal now the UK has left the EU? For trade, for business, for the city, for ordinary people. Make sense of Brexit with CGTN.
Welcome back to Global Business Europe with me, Juliette Mann, and Robin Dwyer. Our top stories. EU leaders demand sanctions on Belarus after authorities diverted a plane and arrested a leading opposition activist who was on board.
More funding and faster intervention. World leaders meet virtually for the annual WHO Health Summit to discuss the next stage of the COVID response.
And back in business, Spain reopens its borders for travellers from a host of countries, including China and the UK.
Investigations are underway into a fatal cable car accident in Italy, which killed 14 people, including 2 children. The one survivor, a 5-year-old boy, is in a serious condition in hospital.
Authorities say a cable snapped as the cabin approached the top of Monterone Mountain, a popular tourist spot in the Piedmont region. Hermione Kitson has the latest.
The devastating end to a scenic ride that never reached its destination. A cable car with 15 tourists on board crashing 20 metres to the rugged terrain below.
It is a terrible moment for our community, and I think also for the whole of Italy. These people thought they were going on a nice day out. Instead, a fateful destiny, a terrible disaster.
It was lunchtime on Sunday when the 20-minute ride from the lakeside town to the top of the mountain was cut tragically short. Emergency services rushed to the scene to find 13 bodies inside and outside of the crumpled cabin. 2 children were airlifted to hospital, but 1 died shortly afterwards. Among the victims, 5 members of the same family of Israeli descent, a husband, wife and their 2-year-old son. Their other 5-year-old son, the sole survivor, in a serious condition. Their grandparents were also in the ill-fated cable car.
We got on the cable car an hour before the tragedy. When we got on, it didn't give any strange signals. Everything was fine. When they told us the news, we were shocked.
Crash investigators have started the painstaking task of determining what went wrong. It's believed a cable snapped while the cabin was on the last pylon and the emergency brake failed.
I saw the cable on the ground. If the cabin fell, it means something happened. I saw it crumpled with 5 people inside. We tried to do what we could. Unfortunately, we couldn't do much.
The cable car was closed for maintenance between 2014 to 2016. After the winter lockdown, it reopened last month. Prosecutors have launched an investigation into involuntary homicide and negligence and have seized the company's maintenance records.
The government and all the institutions are committed to understanding the causes, to understand what happened, but they are also committed to supporting the families of those who lost their lives.
The Morterone Peak is a popular tourist spot because of its panorama of Lake Maggiore and the surrounding Alps, a majestic view that 5 families paid the ultimate price to see. Hermione Kitson, CGTN, Pescara.
21 people died running an ultra-marathon in a mountainous part of northern China after unexpected extreme weather hit. The race was stopped and hundreds of rescuers were deployed to search for the missing athletes. An investigation into the incident is underway. CGTN's Zhao Yunfei reports.
It was a marathon that began with sunny conditions, but it became a tragedy with a sudden onset of high winds and freezing rain. Liu Xibin is a survivor.
I am recovering. I'm feeling better today. I had a fever yesterday, now the fever is gone.
Liu says he doesn't want to recall how he got rescued, a painful experience that has mentally affected many athletes like him. He has been receiving psychological treatment for 2 days.
He was suffering from intense unease yesterday. We conducted a mental intervention for him. Today, he's calmed down.
Liu's arms and legs are injured. His doctor says the runner was trying to save others, even though he was also suffering from a body temperature drop or hyperthermia brought on by the severe weather.
When other runners couldn't move, he wanted to crawl to a place that would be easier for rescuers to find them. But by the time he wanted to try it, he had already lost consciousness.
Local authorities say the sudden change of the weather was unexpected, but they've taken responsibility for the loss.
As the organizers of the marathon, we feel a deep sense of guilt and take full responsibility. We express our deep condolences to the victims and our deep sympathy to the bereaved families and those who were injured.
The incident has sparked discussions over the safety measures of the marathon. The public is demanding details and the investigation is underway. Zhao Yunfei, CGTN, Jingtai County, Gansu Province.
Myanmar's former leader Aung San Suu Kyi has made her first in-person appearance in court since the military takeover. Her legal team says Suu Kyi appeared in good health during their 30-minute meeting. Suu Kyi faces charges that range from illegally possessing walkie-talkie radios to violating a state secrets law.
The US Secretary of State Antony Blinken is heading to the Middle East to meet Israeli and Palestinian officials. The US has made a commitment to ensure the security of the State of Israel, but says it also wants to make sure much-needed aid gets through to the people of Gaza and not Hamas. The ceasefire between Israel and Hamas is now into its 4th day.
15 people are now thought to be dead after a volcano erupted near the city of Goma in the Democratic Republic of Congo. The search is underway for survivors after lava flowed through villages after Mount Nyiragongo's first eruption in 2 decades.
Samoa's first ever woman Prime Minister has been sworn into office in a ceremony held in a tent. Tiamir Mataafa took the oath as government officials, refusing to cede power to the new administration, locked all the doors to the Parliament building. Weeks of political wrangling have followed April's general election in the island nation. Neighbouring New Zealand has called for calm and respect for the rule of law.
The court battle between tech giant Apple and the developer Epic Games is on its final day of evidence in a Californian court. In a case that could reshape the global market for phone applications, Epic has accused Apple of abusing its market position by forcing firms to distribute their products exclusively through its App Store. Well, let's go live now to San Jose and join CGTN's Mark New. Good to see you, Mark. What do we expect to hear today?
Well, the closing arguments have already begun, and this trial is not a jury trial, but instead to be decided by a judge, and that's Yvonne Gonzalez-Rogers, known as YGR. Now, Epic's lawyers are arguing that there's a foremarket and an aftermarket. The foremarket is the competition for actual phone sales, and then there's the aftermarket, where there's the competition for in-app purchases. Epic is arguing that Apple and Google, iOS and Android, have a duopoly on that aftermarket. Apple is pointing out that Epic's definition is designed to allow it to expand on a lawsuit against Google, too. So the judge has already questioned Epic's lawyers, saying they seem to be ignoring the reality that customers choose an ecosystem, and there's a lot of evidence in this trial that in the foremarket of devices, it is Apple's business strategy to create a particular kind of ecosystem that is incredibly attractive to its purchasers. So, for example, if you buy the Xbox, you buy into a variety of these particular walled-off gardens. You know that's what you're buying into. You choose to make that decision. Epic's lawyers say consumers aren't aware of what kind of costs they're going to incur inside the App Store. So if you're thinking about a $1,000 purchase on an iPhone, you're not going to be interested in 30% commission you might pay on a bunch of 99-cent in-app purchases. Juliet.
And of course, the people that are playing those games and using those apps are all different ages, some of whom not necessarily old enough. Apple CEO Tim Cook, he took the stand on Friday. What has Apple's defence been?
Well, they've been saying they have a maniacal focus on the user experience and spending billions of dollars on research to provide security. He says Apple has 1% to 2% malware compared to Android and Windows, who have 40% malware. And so a big part of this case is they want that review and justified by increased security in better service. Fortnite tried to circumvent their 30% commission, and they were by making those in-app purchases and linking to another store, and Apple kicked them off. So inside the game of Fortnite, you're not allowed to link elsewhere. But Tim Cook has said that it's this walled garden argument is akin to going to Apple going to Best Buy, for example, a big box store retailer, and saying, Best Buy, put in a sign that we are advertising that you can buy our phone at another store across the street. So they're saying, why would they want to do that? Cook also reiterated Apple's high customer satisfaction rating, but Epic's lawyers asked him why not a single developer had testified on behalf of Apple. Juliet.
Mark, look, we know regulators all over the world are watching this closely. What would you say are some of Apple's options if they lose this?
Well, different degrees of what could happen depending on, where the loss is if they lose. For example, they could just they could allow that advertising, and that would be an easy policy change. But it could get a bit hairier if Apple was forced to change their commission fee structure down to whatever may be required. Interestingly enough, in this particular case, Phil Schiller, the head of the marketing for Apple, revealed that he had exchanges where he had suggested to Steve Jobs that they couldn't keep this rate forever, that maybe 25 or 20% would be better. So that's an easy change to make. But Epic has argued that the store is making 78% profits. Apple never produced exactly how much they are making. So it's unclear whether they could make up those costs that they're spending to provide that extra security with a cut in commission. On the more drastic side, if the judge rules that Apple needs to allow side loading or independent downloads from a different store, that can cause a lot of headache. And interesting enough, in this case, Craig Federighi, who is the head of software at Apple, even said that the Mac allows that, but their security is not up to standard. So we kind of threw the Mac operating system under the bus in hopes of winning this case. So they could lose vast amounts of revenue that way, but it's unclear whether losing that control over the store, how much revenue would have lost and how much control and security their investment could make up for that. So they will have to sort of rejig their configurations if they lose. Now, this case is expected to be deliberated for longer. The judge will not have a decision for at least several weeks or possibly months.
I think it's something we'll be talking about for weeks or several months as well. Mark New, thank you.
Now, you may have missed the event over the weekend, but Italy is celebrating after the country's entry in this year's Eurovision Song Contest in Rotterdam came from behind to snatch victory. Glam rockers Maneskin took the lead ahead of the jury's favourites France and Switzerland after a wave of support in the public vote. Their success has been cheered across Italy, which is still struggling to recover from the COVID-19 crisis. To see the group in action, go to europe.cgtn.com.
You're watching Global Business Europe. Next stop, how Chinese buses are helping create a greener future for Poland.
Each day, there are millions of stories. Each one can open new perspectives, new possibilities. Wherever you look, we are there. To see, discover, explore. We put the pieces together to find what really matters to you. All around the world, all around the clock. Our reporters are at home across the globe. From our headquarters in Beijing and production centers in Washington, Nairobi, and London, China Global Television Network. Stories from across the globe, reaching people across the globe. CGTN. See the difference.
Mari, what would you say is a good question?
Stephen, I'd say it's one where there's always more than one answer.
The Answers Project is a new podcast series from CGTN Europe. With me, Stephen Cole.
And me, Mari Beveridge. In each episode, we'll take a complex question.
And with the help of some of the world's foremost experts, shine light on some of the answers. So join us for The Answers Project.
Available wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back. Now, two regions with ties that reach around the globe, connecting their futures. All this week, we'll be exploring the relationship between China and Central and Eastern Europe, taking a close-up look at the shared interests that draw them together, from the environment to technology, transport, trade and culture.
Sun, wind and electricity, powerful forces in nature and powerful weapons in the fight against global warming. The environmental landscape is changing in Central and Eastern Europe. In Hungary, Europe's largest solar plant, a $120 million project, is under construction and aims to help the country go carbon neutral by 2050. In Ukraine, the biggest onshore wind park in Europe is about to be built. And in Poland and the Baltics, a new fleet of electric buses is taking to the streets. Different solutions to a global problem that share one thing in common: China. Chinese companies are behind all these projects, helping pave the way towards a greener future. Just a year ago, a coal-fired power plant in central Serbia would spew out sulfur dioxide, making the air around it the most polluted in the region. But now the plant has cleaned up its act with help from Chinese technology. Alyosha Milenkovic reports.
The spring has finally arrived in Serbia. Peach trees are blossoming, and storks are about to return to their nests. But just a short distance from this country scene are smoke-spewing chimneys. They belong to the Kostolac coal-burning power plant. However, the fumes coming out of them this spring are different than just 1 year before.
The air I am breathing here right now is much cleaner than it was just a year ago. The main reason is a massive desulfurization facility which removes thousands of tons of sulfur oxides from this power plant's exhaust fumes.
Every year, this power plant burns 5.5 million tons of lignite coal. In the process, it throws in the air over 95,000 tons of sulfur oxides. Yet, after $130 million worth of investment and state-of-the-art Chinese technology, this has been cut dramatically.
We reduced the percentage of the sulfur oxides in the exhaust fumes by almost 97.5%. From 7,000 plus milligrams per cubic meter, we reduced that concentration to under 200 milligrams per cubic meter.
svedemo sadržaj sumpornih.
The project is mainly financed by the Chinese Exim Bank, while the Chinese company CMEC provided the technology. The facility uses 190,000 tons of limestone every year to treat the power plant's exhaust fumes. 300,000 tons of gypsum, a soft mineral, are produced annually as a byproduct of the process, and that is sold to the construction companies. The desulfurization is just one green initiative, with others also employed across all coal-burning plants in Serbia.
We invest heavily into ecological projects. So far, almost $600 million in those projects, while we have additional ongoing or future projects worth almost $1.2 billion. All of them are tackling problems of water, air and soil pollution.
China's CMEC is building a third block at this power plant. With its capacity to produce around 350 megawatts, the block will follow the strictest EU emission standards. So, until renewable energy is further developed, efforts are being made to cut air pollution as much as possible, with the added bonus of cleaner air. Aljoša Milenković, CGTN, Kostolac.
Solar power is at the forefront of the green energy drive in Central and Eastern Europe. Poland has nearly tripled its solar capacity over the last 2 years, while Bulgaria and Romania have made it onto the industry's top 10 list for EU solar growth. But Hungary's future looks the sunniest as it pushes ahead with construction of Europe's biggest solar plant.
Well, Hungary is at the forefront of the movement to produce carbon-free energy sources, and it's doing so at record speed. It's collaborated with China National Machinery Import and Export Corporation to build Europe's largest solar plant in the southwestern city of Kaposvár. Well, Ferenc Kish is the Renewable Energy Business Development Director at RSK Europe. And I asked him whether the project will help Hungary become carbon neutral, like the rest of Europe is aiming for, by 2050.
Actually, not even 2050. Hungary recently announced that the carbon neutrality will be reached by 2025, 5 years ahead as it was planned before. But to give you an idea about the project at Kaposvár, actually this single power plant, it has 100 megawatt capacity, is only the fraction of the total solar capacity in Hungary. But to build it at a single location, this is something unique. And what we see, RSK as an engineering firm, that to make these flagship projects in the beginning can also promote the country and the potential that other projects will follow. And actually, I'm sure that this will happen.
So a flagship project for Hungary, but also for solar, where there isn't really a European one-size-fits-all. And I know that's political and environmental and historical as much as anything else. But where do you think Hungary is in terms of sustainability compared to its peers?
I would say that each country in the Central European region has its own geographical and historical background for renewables. Hungary is more a flat area, therefore, for example, hydropower is not very well suited, and also no need to explain why offshore wind, for example, is not an option for a landlocked country like Hungary. However, the solar potential is great, and actually also so far the grid network was also well suited to place various small solar plants. Here, the Kaposvár case is a little bit the other way around, because the power line was there, but even a substation was constructed in order to feed all the power for the grid.
So exciting stuff is happening in Hungary. But in terms of energy usage, I mean, how green is Europe? And where do you see the market growing faster? Will it be solar? Will it be hydropower? Talk us through it.
I would say that the energy transition will be not a copy and paste solution. So nobody should think that the big centralized coal or gas-fired power plants will be replaced and many wind farms or a lot of solar fields will be instead of the centralized power plants. I see it more a transition where also the production and the consumption patterns will change. And for example, households will become so-called prosumer. So they will produce their own electricity. They might even have a storage or an electric vehicle for charging and storing electricity and make it a local microgrid. So I think this will be a transitional impact and a process.
Chinese-made buses in a Polish town on the road to a greener future. Polkowice is built on mining, but aims to become the green lungs of the region thanks to a new fleet of electric buses. Luigi Barkle reports.
Final preparations for a major event in Polkowice. They may look modest, but these electric charging stations are set to revolutionise the town's bus system. 9 of these new yellow buses are about to start their journey through local streets, part of a $9 million green upgrade to public transport in this mining town.
We like to say proudly that Polkowice is at the heart of the copper mining district, but we are also a town aspiring to become the green lungs of the region. Hence the strong focus both on pro-environmental action and on increasing green space in our municipality.
Locals seem to back the idea.
I think it's a great solution, especially for the environment, because it does affect our life after all, our breathing and well-being.
It would improve the air quality. It's mostly about that, especially with the mines all around. I think it will be good for us.
The mayor here says the buses, which were made in China, are one part of a broader push to clean the town's image. Officials have made public transport free for everyone and introduced a free bicycle hire scheme. The aim is to reduce congestion and pollution. The latest buses are designed by Chinese firm Yutong. Its local representative says there's growing demand for the products.
The Polish market needs right now zero-emission buses due to green plan of EU, as well a national recovery plan. So within the next years, a lot of zero-emission buses will come.
Following the initial rollout, the plan in Polkowice is to increase the electric fleet so people can get about town while reducing their carbon footprint. Luigi Barkle, CGTN.
From Chinese laptops in Budapest to Czech face masks in Beijing, we'll find out how technology is bringing China and Eastern Europe closer together on Tuesday's edition of The Way Forward.
And finally, large crowds have visited a memorial site in Changsha in China's Hunan province to mourn and celebrate the life of a scientist dubbed the father of hybrid rice. Yuan Longping's work is thought to have saved millions of people from starvation. He died aged 91 on Saturday. In the 1970s, he pioneered a new type of rice that produced far greater yields to meet the booming demand. Hybrid rice now helps to feed an extra 80 million people a year in China.
Well, that's it for Global Business Europe. Thanks for watching.
Coming up next on CGTN, it's Africa Live. See you again tomorrow, same time, same place. From all the team here in London, goodbye.
Goodbye.